Was quite influential, well connected to the security bureaucracy, and played a major role in Iran's coordination around its proxies across the region. His loss will be felt, and the regime, I think, will be on edge as they want to avoid any appearance of vulnerability. The stage managed an electoral process among the population that has demonstrated very little interest in these heavily managed elections. And they've got to ensure that they actually set the leadership up for a smooth transition and a potential succession for the supreme leader.
Do you see any future leader dramatically changing Iran's posture or its strategy in the region at the moment?
It's hard to imagine someone coming from within the system of the Islamic Republic who would make major changes at this point in time. There have been periods of time in the history of the Islamic Republic in which there have been movements to try to promote gradual reform. Those have all been completely shut down by those who control the security bureaucracy and the judiciary. Raisi was a key figure in that repression, and he's likely to be replaced by someone who comes from a similar background.
It's less than a minute left, but I have to ask you about what one gentleman said in Reza's report there, that Raisi's death could somehow empower or embolden the resistance within Iran. Do you see that happening?
I think it's an opportunity, and Iranians have very few opportunities to both celebrate and potentially dream of something different for their country. And so I look forward to seeing what may happen in Tehran and around the country over the course of upcoming weeks.
Suzanne Maloney of the Brookings Institution, thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Cross-examination wrapped up today for Michael Cohen, Donald Trump's former lawyer and fixer, who is also a central witness in the criminal hush money trial against the former president. Mr. Trump's lead defense lawyer, Todd Blanche, portrayed Cohen as a serial liar and someone who has profited by turning against his former boss. The prosecution has rested its case against the former president. William Brangham was in court today and joins us now. So, William, the cross-examination of Michael Cohen ended today, his fourth day on the stand. How else did Mr. Trump's legal team try to undercut the man who is arguably the most important witness for the prosecution?
Jeff, they did what they did a lot of last week as well, which is basically to point out all the ways that they could where Michael Cohen said one thing one time and then said the opposite another time. They kept bringing up stories how Michael Cohen said once upon a time that Donald Trump had no knowledge of the Stormy Daniels hush money scheme, and now claims that he did. Todd Blanche again was saying that Michael Cohen is not motivated to be some truth teller, as Cohen sometimes likes to portray himself, but is instead motivated by vengeance and greed. He again brought up how Cohen has made millions of dollars off books and podcasts and things like that. He's arguing that if Trump is convicted, Cohen will make even more money on top of that. He got Michael Cohen to admit that at one point he actually stole money from the Trump organization. Again, all of these stories are just to reiterate to the jurors that Michael Cohen is not a trustworthy witness, and that everything that's coming out of his mouth on the stand in front of you, jurors, cannot be believed. Now, Cohen himself, under all of this cross-examination, reiterated what he has said all along, which is, yes, I lied at one point for Donald Trump, because I was loyal to him and I was under his sway, but I am not anymore, and now I'm telling the truth.
So when it was the Trump legal team's turn to present their case, it called as a witness the attorney Robert Costello, who tried to further undercut Michael Cohen's credibility. What did Mr. Costello have to say on the witness stand?
Costello is a former federal prosecutor, now a lawyer in private practice. And back in 2018, after Michael Cohen's offices and hotel room and apartment were raided by the FBI with regards to a different investigation, Costello offered himself to Cohen as a legal advisor. And again, this was back during a time when Michael Cohen was still saying that Donald Trump had no knowledge of the Stormy Daniels affair. And Cohen says that Costello, to him, felt like he was part of a pressure campaign by Rudy Giuliani, who Costello is very close with, and by Donald Trump to make sure that Michael Cohen never changed that story. On the stand today, Costello said, When I first met Michael Cohen, he said, I have nothing on Donald Trump to offer any authorities. Donald Trump knew nothing about the Stormy Daniels business. He said that Michael Cohen was somewhat manic and near suicidal, and he rejected any notion that he had been trying to pressure Cohen to change his story. Costello's testimony was something of a last-minute addition, and he was truly a cantankerous and feisty witness. At several times today, he expressed verbal displeasure with judges' comments, with judges sustaining certain objections. And at one point, the judge was so perturbed by how Costello was behaving that he cleared the courtroom and basically gave Costello a tongue lashing, saying, when you are in my courtroom, you will not behave this way. You will uphold a certain level of decorum. You will not be giving me any side eye. And if this keeps going, there will be repercussions here. The jury was brought back in, and Costello finished his testimony. He will still be on the stand for more cross-examination tomorrow, though.
So in the less than 30 seconds we have left, William, walk us through the timing for the rest of this trial. Expected to wrap up as early as next week?
That was the plan originally, that we would be done this week, but the judge did not want to have a circumstance where this week jury got to hear the closing arguments from both sides and then sat basically with that information for the entire Memorial Day weekend. So he said, because Costello's testimony ran a little bit long, we're going to push all of this off and have closing arguments Tuesday after Memorial Day.
All right, that is William Brangham again in New York City for us tonight. William, thank you.
Thanks, Jeff.
Rapid advancements in artificial intelligence continue as companies roll out new products, sparking both wonder and concern. Over the past week, OpenAI unveiled its next-generation chatbot, or ChatGPT 4o. The new AI assistant can respond to voice, text, and visual commands in real time, as in this presentation when engineers asked it to tell a bedtime story.
Oh, a bedtime story about robots and love? I got you covered. Gather round, Barrett. Once upon a time.
I really want maximal emotion, like maximal expressiveness, much more than you were doing before.
Understood. Let's amplify the drama. Once upon a time.
Can you do this in a robotic voice now?
Initiating dramatic robotic voice. Once upon a time.
OpenAI actually paused the use of that particular virtual voice after some pointed out its similarity to the robot voiced by Scarlett Johansson in the movie Her.
Good morning, Theodore.
Morning.
You have a meeting in 5 minutes. You want to try getting out of bed?
You're too funny.
Okay, good. I'm funny. I want to learn everything about everything.
Google also unveiled a new AI-powered search function this week. For more on that and all these developments, we're joined by Nilay Patel, editor-in-chief of The Verge and host of the Decoder podcast. So Nilay, let's just start with Google, the most visited website in the world, making major changes to how billions of people search the web. Users will now see an AI-generated answer for their search. How big a deal is that?
It's huge.
It's a momentous change for how the web works today. A lot of websites that you visit are driven by the need for Google traffic. It's up to 30% or more of most big websites' traffic comes from Google. So when Google starts keeping more of that traffic for itself, that's going to change the economics of putting content on the web. It might shift some of that content to platforms like TikTok and YouTube and Instagram. And it will certainly shake up how the web is organized and structured. Because instead of getting links from Google, publishers might try to game their way into those AI previews. And I think Google has a big question to answer around what the incentive to put new content on the web is if it's just going to synthesize that content and present it to people searching for free. I talked to Google CEO Sundar Pichai about this. He said it's a paradigm shift. There's going to be changes, but he believes the web will endure.
You described the reaction to the news of this new search from people who actually make websites as fundamentally apocalyptic. Why?
Yeah, I mean, the web has reached a steady state over the past 25, 30 years where, people put up websites, Google indexes those websites. We allow Google to do that because that's what's considered fair use. And then in return, Google sends traffic to websites. And it's a huge portion of traffic for a lot of the websites on the internet is Google search traffic. If Google starts to keep that traffic for themselves, then a lot of businesses will fail.
Okay, what about this new chatbot that ChatGPT that OpenAI just revealed? We saw a brief demo of that. Is this basically the model for how all of us are going to be interacting with our tech one day?
I hope not.
It's the vision. Google unveiled something that's very similar to it called Project Astra. This idea that you have a multimodal search interface where you've got your phone in your hand, your phone is looking at things with its camera, it's talking to you about what it sees, you can ask it questions. It has a personality. OpenAI is really leaning into the personality factor here. What we haven't seen is a huge leap in terms of accuracy. So because the chatbots are very good at language, you can build these products that are very convincing. Right? They can talk to you. They have these personalities. They can emote in different ways. They can do different kinds of image generation. They can recognize videos of broken toys in your home and tell you how to fix them. The flip side of it is language and intelligence aren't 100% correlated, maybe not at all correlated. And so you're seeing this gap of the demos where you ask it questions and it's very confident in what it tells you, but sometimes it's wrong. And I think that's actually the thing that's going to hold these kinds of products back from widespread adoption, is they've got to get better at being accurate. I think we're seeing incredible advances in facility with language, and we're seeing a pretty steady state in terms of actual intelligence.
Meanwhile, Microsoft, we should mention, is also going to make its own big AI announcement this week. What do we expect to hear from them?
So today, Microsoft unveiled a new line of AI PCs, Copilot PCs. That's what they're branding them as. They've got a new chip in them, which they claim will be faster than the chip in Apple's MacBook Air. That has been the benchmark for the industry for a very long time. And they're rolling out a new version of Windows that has a bunch of AI features built into it for consumers, including one called Recall, which is fascinating, where the operating system, or Windows, basically watches along with you. As you use your computer, you can ask it questions. As you're playing games, it can talk to you about what it's seeing on the screen in the game. You can ask it questions for help in the games. As you're using the applications on your PC, you can ask it for help. It can drive your PC for you. This is a big vision in computing. It's been the dream for a long time. You'll have an intelligent agent on your computer that is actually helping you use that computer. Microsoft took the first steps of that today with the Copilot PCs. It seems very compelling. I have a lot of questions about privacy and security and where all that data is going and who's tracking it, who has access to it. Microsoft says it's all being done locally on a PC, but I really want to test this stuff out and make sure that that's actually true.
You mentioned privacy, security concerns, some accuracy concerns with some of the other AI functions. I guess the question is, how much insight do you have as someone who covers this into where all of those concerns rank in terms of how quickly some of these tech firms are pushing out new products? Is that a shared concern?
I don't think that concern ranks nearly highly enough. I think what you're seeing here is an extraordinary battle between a bunch of big tech companies who feel the competitive pressure for the first time in a long time from OpenAI, from one another, and they're racing these products out to capture market share so they don't get left behind. Just a few weeks, Apple's going to roll out a bunch of AI features in the new version of the iOS for the iPhone.
You mean you don't
you'll see them
left behind
the Google
like
or
GoPro?
OpenAI for some of the features in a way that might cut against some of their privacy promises. We have to see what they claim. And that is all because of the pressure that this is a paradigm shift on the order of mobile, on the order of social networking. And if you get left behind, you're going to lose a ton of market share.
That is Nilay Patel, editor-in-chief of The Verge and host of the Decoder podcast. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
As Donald Trump's criminal hush money trial nears its conclusion, high-profile Republican supporters continue to make appearances to the New York City courthouse to show their support for the former president. Is this the new litmus test for GOP candidates? One of the questions for our Politics Monday team. That's Amy Walter of the Political Report with Amy Walter and Tamara Keith of NPR. Great to see you both. So let's start there, Tam, with this stream of GOP elected leaders who have been making this pilgrimage to this New York City courthouse to speak out in support of Donald Trump. What should we make of this? These leaders, these elected leaders, say that they're there to speak on behalf of Mr. Trump because he can't speak on his own behalf because of his gag order.
And they are delivering the message that the former president wants to have delivered, a message that, both with their presence and with their words, is saying this trial is serious. This trial is a witch hunt or, a Democratic prosecutor run amok. By making that pilgrimage up there, often dressed in the Trump uniform, they are standing behind him, like literally, and signaling, certainly to Republican base voters, it's okay. You don't need to worry about this thing, no matter how it turns out. This is fine. Don't worry.
And Amy, Speaker Mike Johnson's appearance is notable, I think, given the constitutional heft of his office. And by being there, he is effectively leveraging his speakership and all of the symbolic weight and significance that carries against the justice system.
Yes, although I would argue, Jeff, that really what he's trying to do by going there and showing his support is actually trying to keep his own job. We know the role that Donald Trump can play in keeping the fractious Republican Party together. And in fact, he was pretty much responsible for making sure that Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene's call to oust Mike Johnson failed. He put out on Truth Social that, she's really great and everything, but now's the time for us to come together. Don't vote to oust the speaker. But he had a very important note at the very end of that missive where he said, we may, at some point, it very well may be the case that he needs to be ousted. That is not now. So ultimately, if you're Mike Johnson, you know that literally every day your ability to keep your job depends on getting the support of the former president.
And at the same time, the so-called big lie about the 2020 election has now become this big litmus test for Republicans, and it's expanded to their willingness to accept the results of the 2024 election. Congressman, or rather Senator Marco Rubio, said to be a Trump VP hopeful, was on Meet the Press yesterday, and he wouldn't commit to accepting the 2024 results.
Will you accept the election results of 2024 no matter what happens, Senator?
No matter what happens? No, if it's an unfair election, I think it's going to be contested by each side.
Senator, no matter who wins.
I think you're asking the wrong person. The Democrats are the ones that have opposed every Republican victory since 2000. Every single one.
And he's not the only one. Senator Tim Scott would also not commit to accepting the results of the 2024 election. This has very much become party orthodoxy now.
And this is very similar to language that many Republicans, including Mike Pence, landed on after the 2020 election and before January 6th, where they didn't want to go all the way as far as Trump is going and say that, the election was stolen, but they wanted to say, well, we should look into it. And what they're saying here is, well, we'll support the results if it's a fair election. But it's worth noting that former President Trump really only thinks an election is fair if he wins. And I will just remind you that after 2016, he won. And then he claimed that there was voter fraud in California and New Hampshire because he didn't win those states. So he is someone who has a very lengthy, proven track record of denying election results. And now you have Republicans out there, mainstream Republicans, creating sort of a permission structure.
Get rid of them.
Saying that,
get the hell out of here.
Fair, then maybe I'll support the results. They're not willing to commit in advance. And that creates a permission structure for mainstream Republican voters to say, well, if they're okay with this, then I can be okay with this.
And Amy, we know how damaging this denialism is for our democracy. How does it play politically? I mean, is there political utility in Republicans rallying around this issue? What does it do for, moderate Republicans or independent voters who are going to be the swing deciders in this election?
When you see folks like Marco Rubio or those other candidates you discussed going on TV and answering questions like this, they really aren't speaking to voters. They're speaking to an audience of one, and that is Donald Trump. Many of them are essentially in tryouts to be the vice president. What we know about this president, it's always been the case, but I think it has even ratcheted up in the most recent time period, that he looks for loyalty above all else, and especially in his vice president, the person who will be with him if he gets back to the White House. He wants to make sure that no matter what, this person is going to stand with him. And I think we're going to see similar loyalty tests all the way down to any office that would get filled by a political appointee should Donald Trump win election to a second term.
Well, let's talk about the debates, because I think that news broke last Wednesday. It was after we had a chance to speak with you both last Monday. We've got the first scheduled debate now just 6 weeks away. It's going to happen in June on CNN. The rival campaigns have skirted around the commission on presidential debates.
Can't
Tam,
wait.
what's the risk-reward calculus for both sides here, having this debate in a studio, no audience?
So both Trump and his team and Biden and his team think that his opponent cannot stand there for 90 minutes and conduct a debate without embarrassing themselves, falling asleep, slurring their words, you name it. They think that their opponents are incapable of going into a debate. So that is part of the calculus on both sides. What I will say is that on the Biden side, I've spoken to people close to the Biden campaign. They really believe, and they've been saying this for
I don't know
months,
what you're watching
that
right
people
now.
are
It's
not
watching video.
focused on this campaign. And so when
You got
Trump
that.
said anytime, anywhere, they said, let's do it in June because we want people to start paying attention to the choice and being aware of the stakes in the election. That's the theory that the Biden campaign is operating under, is that their numbers will improve if people realize that yes, in fact, Joe Biden and Donald Trump are the candidates, and so they're trying to jump ahead of the conventions, which would be a traditional time when people would become more aware of the election.
Amy, how do you see it? And is June too early for a debate that'll matter?
I think that if you're the Biden campaign, as Tam pointed out, it's not too early. You need to shake this race up. I think, if anything, what the decision by the Biden campaign to accept this debate suggests that they know that they are running behind, or at least not in the position they want to be for an incumbent president. They need to turn this election from one that's a referendum for Biden to one that's a choice between Biden and Trump. The risk, of course, is that either it doesn't work, and now it's June, the numbers don't move very much, and the president goes into his convention a few weeks later with an even more depressed and anxious base of voters, and Trump is able to go into his convention with a lot of wind at his back. So there is, I think, a very big risk for Biden here that it doesn't go as planned. But if the Biden campaign, as Sam pointed out, their entire theory of the case is that this has to be made clear that it is a choice.
Amy
That
Walters,
choice has to be put in
PBS
voters as quickly
signing
as
off.
possible, as quickly